It's 6 p.m. on a Friday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. In response to North Korea's nuclear bomb test and missile launch, U.S. President Barack Obama slaps new sanctions against the regime, including effective cutoff of cash flow. While various measures to provide some relief for businesses affected by the sudden closure of the Kaesong industrial complex are set to be implemented, lawmakers still argue over the closing of the joint park. Against the U.S. dollar, the Korean won plunges to lows not seen in more than 5 years. The central bank pledges to take action if necessary. U.S. President Barack Obama imposes tough new sanctions on North Korea. They're all aimed at cutting off the regime's money supply and freezing assets to prevent further nuclear arms development by that regime. Our Park Ji-won starts us off.
In response to Pyongyang's hydrogen bomb test and missile launch, U.S. President Barack Obama signed a series of new and tough sanctions against North Korea on Thursday. With the signing, the bill welcomed on both sides of the aisle of Congress took effect immediately. The sanctions aim to cut off any transactions and money that could be funneled into North Korea for further development of nuclear programs. The sanctions allow the freezing of assets of any individuals or enterprises engaged in business related to North Korea's nuclear or weapons programs. Those engaged in the import or export of luxury goods to and from North Korea and those involved in serious human rights abuses will also be subjected to the law. The South Korean government welcomed the latest imposition of new sanctions. In a written statement Friday, the South Korean Foreign Ministry vowed to cooperate with the international community on concerted measures to counter North Korean threats. The ministry said it expects the sanctions, which passed Congress with bipartisan support and the first to solely target North Korea, to provide a solid foundation for implementing strong and effective measures. The ministry added that the South Korean government will take every possible measure to induce Pyongyang to relinquish its nuclear ambitions. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
South Korea has questioned whether North Korea deserves to have UN member status. The country's ambassador to the United Nations made Seoul's first formal remark on the matter, drawing further attention to Pyongyang's violations. Park Geunhye has more.
North Korea's eligibility as a UN member has come under the spotlight. Speaking at a meeting on respect for UN principles and goals at the New York headquarters this week, South Korea's ambassador to the United Nations, Oh Jun, launched a scathing attack on Pyongyang.
Past decade, the DPRK has persistently violated all Security Council resolutions on the DPRK, calls into question its qualification as a member of the United Nations.
He made a point that upon becoming a member, North Korea had solemnly pledged to comply with the obligations of the UN. He added that the repeated breaches are not only a direct challenge to the authority of the Security Council, but also a display of contempt and disregard. Concluding his remarks, he called for the Security Council to adopt a, quote, robust and comprehensive resolution against the regime for its latest provocations. The rebuke was echoed by South Korea's Deputy Ambassador Han Chung-hee at a special committee of the UN Charter. In response, North Korea's representative to the UN claimed the Security Council does not have the right to ban the peaceful launch of a satellite aimed at defending North Korea's sovereignty and developing the economy. Most of the international community sees Pyongyang's satellite launch as a cover for a long-range ballistic missile test. This marks the first time South Korea has formally taken issue with North Korea's UN status since both Koreas became members in 1991. Park Geunhye, Arirang News.
South Korean police have heightened security for a North Korean defector after Pyongyang reportedly ordered his assassination. Armed guards will be on duty around the clock to ensure the vice president of the Institute for National Security Strategy, Ko Young-hwan's safety. Ko, a former diplomat at North Korea's embassy in the Congo, defected to South Korea in 1991. South Korean authorities are taking no chances after Seoul's spy agency warned on Thursday that North Korea was preparing to carry out terror attacks in the south. President Park Geunhye met with heads of regional offices and called for concerted efforts between the central and local governments to reinforce countermeasures for possible terror attacks and to make greater use of infrastructure set up for her creative economy initiative. For more on what was discussed, we turn to Song Ji-sun.
17 local governments heads sit down with President Park Geunhye at Cheongwade Friday afternoon to discuss ways to enhance synergy between the central government and regions in the country, pledging that the central government will support development led by each region based on their characteristics and strength. The president noted that decentralized autonomy of regional governments allows for more flexibility to adapt to the rapid changes of the future. President Park called on local governments to make greater use of the national chain of innovation centers, employment zones, and regulation-free zones to create momentum, lead growth, and aid the government's reform drives. With the increasing threat of Pyongyang carrying out cyber or biochemical attacks at any time or place, Park called for concerted efforts between the central and local governments to set up a systematic network to combat such aggressions, as failure to respond in a timely manner could result in a national disaster. Local leaders also vowed cooperation, saying the regions share a common destiny. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea has laid out additional support measures for factory owners that operated in the inter-Korean complex in Kaesong after North Korea abruptly expelled them last week. Connie Kim tells us what they are.
South Korea's Special Government Task Team has laid out additional support measures for companies affected by the shutdown of the inter-Korean Kaesong industrial complex. The meeting was a third of its kind, headed by 8 related ministries, the Financial Services Commission, and the Small and Medium Business Administration, following Seoul's announcement last week of support measures for firms that were expelled from the park.
We will finalize measures to allow the hiring of more foreign workers, support company owners with new factory sites in the south, and those that have provided services to businesses at the complex.
Seoul will provide factory sites for companies that are having difficulty securing alternative land to operate. Currently, there are 56 factory sites available to factory owners, which will be provided rent-free for the first year and half-price for the following 2 years. In addition, company owners will be allowed to hire more foreign workers, as many as 40% of the legal quota. The measure is aimed at utilizing cheap labor, as North Korean workers were paid some $130 a month at the Kaesong factory. More tax exemption benefits will be extended to Kaesong complex company owners. Under the newly released measures, South Koreans that have worked at the complex will pay half the health insurance fees and 70% of their employment insurance for half a year. The measures are in line with the government's plan to mitigate the losses of companies after the last remaining vestige of inter-Korean cooperation shut down. Seoul has benefited economically to the tune of some $3.2 billion from operations at the industrial park over the past 10 years, more than 10 times that of Pyongyang. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Day 2 of the parliamentary interpellation session, economy took center stage and also Kaesong. Shin Se-min brings us the details.
Dominating Friday's interpellation session at the National Assembly were questions regarding what the government is doing to breathe new life into the country's slowing economy. Responding to criticism that the current economic policies have been a complete failure as growth figures have consistently been below the target rate, Korea's chief economic policymaker remained optimistic.
The government has been preparing thoroughly for long-term economic growth, so it will take time to see the effects. Even if the figures don't meet the target rate now, we are seeing signs that our economy is on the right path.
Although the Korean economy ended up with 2.6% GDP growth last year, far below the government target rate of 3.1%, The finance minister said the outcome was clear evidence that the economy did well amid lingering uncertainties at home and abroad, like the slowing Chinese economy and a potential rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve. Lawmakers also blame the government for economic losses from the shutdown of Kaesong Factory Park, estimated to have cost the South Korean government some $3.2 billion.
Although the Kaesong industrial complex was profitable for South Korea, its initial purpose was to benefit inter-Korean relations, not economic growth.
Also during the inquiry, the ruling political party reiterated the need to pass economy-related bills without obstruction, including one on improving the service sector, while the main opposition party cautiously called for the government's thorough review of the U.S. missile defense system, adding that deployment could cause China to retaliate through economic measures, jeopardizing the local economy. With lawmakers emphasizing the need for quick passage of bills to spur economic growth, all that remains is for stalled bills be put to a full floor vote at a regular session scheduled for next Tuesday. 신세민, Arirang News.
Now, besides the 100-plus South Korean companies that have been affected by the shutdown of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, shops that focused on selling products made in Kaesong are also taking a blow. Lee Ji-won tells us more.
This shop in the popular tourist district of Insadong in central Seoul only sells products made at the Kaesong Industrial Complex with the hope of playing even a small role in the unification of the two Koreas. Its exclusive focus on goods from the inter-Korean factory make it the only shop of its kind in the country. Since opening in September, the shop has become known among locals not only for that, but also for its high-quality inventory.
The sewing is good and the products are well made. Most importantly, they are less expensive than similar goods in other shops.
The design and texture feel really impressive. I'd like to come here to shop more often.
Soon after opening in Insadong, the shop also launched 5 other branches around the country. But with the abrupt shutdown of Kaesong Industrial Complex, the shop's future and the livelihood of its employees are hanging in the balance.
Everything here, from the shoes to the processed food, is made by 12 of the companies in the Kaesong Industrial Complex. The government's decision to shut the complex down was really devastating, and it means we won't have any products to sell.
The companies with factories in the complex had less than a day to clear out, which meant they had to leave the majority of their raw materials and products behind. Their losses will now be passed on to the Insadong shop and its network. And with the complex closed indefinitely, the shop has canceled its plans to open 3 more branches, while the existing branches are already trying to figure out whether and how they can stay open.
We only have enough stock for 3 to 4 more months, so we're holding meetings to find a solution for our business. It would be best if the industrial park opened again, but if not, we'll have to find other suppliers.
Seoul Mayor Park Geunhye visited the shop this week to encourage the owner and vowed to help them find a way to keep the business open. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
The Korean won sunk to a near 6-year low against the U.S. dollar. The country's central bank referred to the recent movements as herd behavior and pledged to take action if necessary. Kim Min-ji has the latest.
The Korean won took another dive against the U.S. dollar on Friday.
The local currency closed at over 1,234 won against the greenback, down 7 won from the previous day. That's the lowest level in 5 years and 8 months.
This comes on the back of investor appetite for risk-averse assets after the European Central Bank commented on downside economic risks, such as faltering commodity prices and concerns over China's slowdown in its January minutes, as well as Saudi Arabia opposing a cut in oil production. On top of that, growing expectations of a rate cut by Korea's central bank and geopolitical risks stemming from North Korea's provocations added further downward pressure. At one point, the Korean won was hovering around the 1,241 level, but soon retraced some of its losses after the country's central bank vowed to exhaust all means to tackle the volatility of the local currency.
We remain unchanged in our commitment to deal with excessive volatility in the market and will take all available measures if necessary.
On the local bourse, Korean stocks ended higher, with the benchmark Kospi adding nearly 0.4% and the tech-heavy Kosdaq gaining almost 1%. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's ICT has long been considered an important engine for growth, but the economic slowdown has hampered exports of this sector. Kim Ji-yeon sheds light on a glimpse of the government's plans to reverse the trend by upping its support for companies in that field.
The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning and the country's leading IT organizations have been coming up with ways to boost Korea's ICT exports, which have been slumping for the past 4 months. The private and public entities include Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics, and the state-run Institute for Information and Communications Technology Promotion. The ICT Ministry has vowed to support entities exporting to markets deemed to have great growth potential in the IT sector. For starters, the ministry will support entities exporting goods or services related to information security to the Middle East and Africa. The ministry will help them export goods related to broadcasting contents to countries including Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Britain, and Poland. The ministry says it will target China and the U.S. as potential markets for contents incorporating K-pop music and ICT. With the lifting of global economic sanctions on Iran, the ministry says it will reinstate its ICT partnership with Tehran. The ministry plans to facilitate information sharing among businesses to increase production of various custom-made software contents for foreign markets. In the virtual reality sector, the ministry will utilize on- and offline foreign distribution channels to export broadcasting contents. Entities in the hardware sector asked the ministry to help their foreign branches gain a competitive advantage in foreign premium markets. In response, the ministry vowed to increase visits to some of the regions to revitalize Korea's ICT exports there. The country's ICT exports plunged nearly 18% in January from the same period last year to around $12 billion, largely due to increased competition from cheaper Chinese goods. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And that's all we have for you at this hour. As always, thank you for watching.